Let's move on to President Biden. So obviously, the way that the United States is going to respond to this is also going to impact the conflict, both on the ground and geopolitically. President Biden happened to be speaking the next day on Wednesday at the UN General Assembly, where he directly addressed President Putin. Let's take a listen.
Let us speak plainly. A permanent member of the United Nations Security Council invaded its neighbor, attempted to erase a sovereign state from the map. Russia has shamelessly violated the core tenets of the United Nations Charter. No more important than the clear prohibition against countries taking the territory of their neighbor by force. Again, just today, President Putin has made overt nuclear threats against Europe and a reckless disregard for the responsibilities of the non-proliferation regime. This world should see these outrageous acts for what they are. Putin claims he had to act because Russia was threatened. But no one threatened Russia, and no one other than Russia sought conflict. In fact, we warned it was coming, and with many of you, we worked to try to avert it.
For those who are just listening, you showed a couple stone-faced Russians sitting there, taking the exact translation. Now, let's at least understand also, beyond the warnings, the chastising of Russia, how the U.S. is spinning this along with the Western coalition. Let's put this up there. Directly in response to this, the United States said that Putin's mobilization was a, quote, sign of weakness and Russian failure. That was specifically from the U.S. ambassador to Ukraine, calling it a failure, taunting the Russians, saying it is a sign of weakness. Now, they're not wrong that it is a sign of weakness. Obviously, nobody calls up more troops in a sign of strength, but also accused them of, quote, nuclear blackmail in terms of the new threats that are being made. So the reason why it matters is that we are putting this in the league of this is why we all have to remain united. And this is also why it is foolish on Putin's part. I mean, things are not good right now on the European continent. I think that if he hadn't done this, let's say that the war hadn't changed all that much, there might have been some opening for protests in France and Germany, especially as it gets colder in the winter. These governments, they're dug in. You can't change policy whenever the guy is calling up 300,000 people and waving a nuclear weapon in your face. It just makes, like, why would the German chancellor change policy then? Like, now he's moving forward. They're nationalizing like a Russian oil plant in Italy right now. One of their biggest suppliers is also a Russian oil giant. They're probably just going to take it over. This is basically bifurcating the two economies and making it much more difficult for them. Now, Russia obviously is going to continue to, I'm doing a monologue on this, they're going to be fine-ish on oil. They'll still sell to India and China, but any hope I think they had of reconciliation with the West in the interim 6 month to 1 year period, no Western government is going to change its policy when you're calling up 300,000 people and waving a nuke in your face.
Well, Putin, I mean, the reality is at this point, he's left with no good options. I mean, that's the fact of the matter is, like, they are in such rough shape in Ukraine right now, and he's facing so much domestic political pressure, whether real or manufactured, to, you know, have a more wholesale mobilization and have more of a full-throated, like, actual war footing, that I don't know that he felt he had any other hand he could play. But I think you're right about, I mean, we talked a lot about heading into the winter, though, was a big question mark. That's why Zelensky orchestrated this particular push right now, to keep the Europeans and to keep us on board and to keep us enthusiastic and to convince us, like, okay, these weapons that we're sending and all this aid that we're sending, it's worth it, it's working. The pain that we're gonna feel this winter, it's all worth it. The plan is coming together and the Ukrainians can actually succeed. So he executed that. It worked, you know, pretty much flawlessly in terms of what they were able to accomplish, both in reality on the ground and in terms of the sort of massive PR victory with regards to our public and to the European public. You have not had yet big signs that there is a real faltering of commitment either, you know, in any part of the NATO alliance. So, you know, if Putin was betting on, okay, we're going to go into the winter and things are going to be tough and the public is going to revolt against what the European and American governments are doing, that might still happen, but there aren't signs of it yet. And I think you're right that if that's what he was originally betting on and what Zelensky was originally concerned about, the fact that he is moving forward with this, 300,000 person mobilization and saying, hey, by the way, I might use nukes. Yeah, that's going to harden commitment to opposition to Russia here ultimately.
He gives us no choice. I mean, and again, would I run everything differently? Yeah, I would. But I'm telling you, in reality, the way that the West is currently positioned, they are locked in now for the entire winter. No matter how the gas price goes, no matter how high energy prices are on the continent, they can't give in because that's just, look, politically in that dynamic that everybody's locked into, he secured higher NATO spending when he invaded, and now he has secured the political dynamic geopolitically for time to come. And this is why I always want to acknowledge, look, this is on him. Nobody forced his hand to invade Ukraine, and then nobody asked you to call up 300,000 people and use nuclear blackmail against the West. So don't be surprised, when your economy is tanking, and then even when there is domestic political strife in Europe, that they're just not going to give in. It's like, this is what happens when people get locked into conflict.
In one more sign of how much things have gone off the rails for the Russian military, there was a report this morning, take it with a grain of salt, et cetera, but there was an interesting report this morning that Putin is actually personally directing troops on the battlefield, which is like,
That's like LBJ Vietnam shit.
Right, if you have a functional military,
that never happens.
That should not be happening.
Let's do a little history lesson, right? One of the problem ones with the Vietnam War was that literally the president of the United States has a rolling hills model of Vietnam and is picking B-52 targets. Yeah, once that happens, things have gone bad, very, very. Especially in the age of a great power modern military. It shows he's a narcissist, doesn't trust anybody who's around him.
And they've also taken hits in terms of, some of their top generals being taken out with help from our intelligence. So I guess he's feeling like the ranks are pretty thin at this point.
Okay, but at the same time, and there is some important polling. This is why it's always important to balance. Let's put this up there. The Concerned Veterans of America, they're a great group. They do a lot of very realist stuff, and they actually do polls on how Americans feel about U.S. policy towards Russia and Ukraine, and they dig down into the nitty-gritty. That's why I like it. So here's what they say, quote, only 15% of the American public supports sending more military and financial aid to Ukraine than wealthy European countries, with twice as many people who want to send less assistance than we currently are. This, of course, comes at the same time the Biden administration wants $15 billion more for Ukraine. Furthermore, 54% of respondents said the United States should only continue to provide aid to Ukraine if the Europeans are willing to match our support. Fact check, not happening right now. Second, around half of respondents of the United States said that the U.S. should provide the same level of support for Ukraine as wealthy countries and not $1 more. Then, 57% strongly do not want direct American military intervention in the war in Ukraine. Only 14% support strongly or somewhat. They all live here in Washington, D.C. And then finally, the plurality of respondents said that Biden should make lowering or eliminating inflation his top priority. Only 2% said they believe that ensuring a defeat of Russia and Ukraine should be the president's main priority. So I love this poll because it ranks, these are tests. You ain't gonna get this from Politico or from anybody else. They're like, hey, Europe spends X, America spends Y, and that's 10 times more than all of Europe combined. So,
how do you feel about that?
How do you feel about that?
Yeah.
People are like, hey, that's bullshit. But they don't even know. They don't even know the date unless they watch this show. Even then, it's like it's very difficult in order to get this information out. So when people are confronted, they're very nuanced. Of course they want to help Ukraine, but they think the Europeans should step up.
Yeah.
They think that, and they also strongly oppose intervention. I love this because it just shows you Americans are good people, but they also don't want to get, embroiled in a multi-decade war and all this. And the establishment people in this party and in the media, they don't represent any of this view.
Yeah, what these numbers really underscored to me is, again, what a sort of pivotal moment this is, because public opinion does hang on kind of a knife's edge. So right now there continues to be support for the direction. Obviously, with Zelensky being able to notch some significant victories, that's going to continue to encourage that support. And, the fact you've had gas prices coming going down. You're going to cover whether it's going to continue in that direction or not, has helped to sustain that support. European governments are starting to put together packages so that they can help their populations out to get through the winter. But it really does show you why both Putin and Zelensky saw this moment right now as such a critical moment in terms of the future trajectory of this war. So again, I think a lot is going to be determined this winter based on, how energy prices go, how domestic populations feel about this, what happens on the battlefield. Does this surge of new troops from Putin, does it make a difference, or does it just kind of continue the status quo?
I don't know. I did, though. I'm feeling very conflicted. I just read a report about how high energy prices in Europe means that European companies now have to manufacture in the U.S. And I was like, I don't know, man. Maybe I'm cheering on the high gas prices.
Silver lining there for us.
I'm like, a little bit of a silver lining for us. So, sorry, Europe.
Cable news is ripping us apart, dividing the country, making it impossible to function as a society, and making it impossible to know just what is true and what is false. But the good news is they are failing and they know it.
That is why we're building something new, a new mainstream, a healthier one, something more trustworthy, something that we are going to need in one of the most pivotal times in American history. We are building up here for the midterms, for the upcoming presidential election, but we need your help. So if you can help us out by becoming a premium member today at breakingpoints.com, we're trying to change America for the better and the entire world.
So what are you waiting for, guys? Go to breakingpoints.com and sign up and help us build a new mainstream.